Beis. Okay, so we're on the sugya of Ketzitzas and Zuas Yasan. So yesterday we had the Mishnah on the Aleph Amar Aleph that said that vines that are mechuber, as long as they're still connected to the ground, so it's possible for schach. And Rashi told, the Gemara doesn't say a source. The Rashi brings the source. Today's Gemara coming up, we'll see the Gemara, and Rashi says that that's also the source for mechuber. But if it's attached to the ground, it's possible for schach. So the Mishnah said that if you cut it, it's not attached anymore, so it's kosher. But the Gemara had a machlokes, Rav and Shmuel, if you first put it on the sukkah and then you cut it, is that a way to make it kosher also? Or there's a din tasa that says you should make sukkah tasa, you should make sukkah, and therefore you have to make it kosher. You can't make it in a way that is possible and then somehow be machshir it under the table. You have to make an act of making a kosher sukkah. So Rav said, Ketzitzas and Zuas Yasan. He agrees to the principle that you have to taslo manaseh, but he says that by cutting it, that's an act of making the sukkah. The same way placing kosher schach. So cutting the schach is also a way of placing it on, and is good enough. The Gemara compared this also to tzitzis. Tzitzis also has the same issue that if you have one big string, you take one string theoretically and double it over a couple of times and put it in to the hole of the beggar and make all the knots and everything looks fine, but it's still attached, one big string. You have to cut it. So the same thing would be that it might be a problem with taslo manaseh. Shmuel says. And Rav will say that by cutting it, that's how you're making the sukkahs, the tzitzis now. The Torah says you should make tzitzis. I made tzitzis by cutting it. So that's a machlokas. And the Gemara is in the middle of deciding, proving this issue. So we start from the top again, top line, on Yud Aleph Amud Beis, Meisvei, to bring a brisa about this issue. Talan de la pasuk shechutin shalahen psulin. If you put the tzitzis on the garment without cutting the ends, you made one string that you doubled back and forth and made the tzitzis like that without cutting the ends, so it's possible. So it doesn't say that it's possible. The Gemara thinks my love doesn't mean that it's always going to be possible. There's no answer just to cut the ends. It's possible the way it is, and according to Rav, it should be enough to just cut it now. We'll shift to the Rav. Is this not a kash on Rav? Rav says it doesn't say that it's possible forever and you can't fix it up. Unless it's possible the way it is. As is, it's possible. You can't leave the tzitzis that are still a continuous one string. But if you cut it now, it would be good enough. So the Gemara so there's no kasha from this alone.
I'm not getting the case.
The case is that you take one string, you doubled it over again. You have one big string that's doubled over 2 times, and you put it through the hole of the tzitzis, and you made a knot, and you wound it around, everything good. But it's not 4 strings. It's one string. That's a continuous string. So it's good enough to make. It's good enough to cut the tips of it after you already.
Sounds like it's good. No, is that what I'm hearing?
No, it sounds like it's not good. It says psulin, and Rav says that Rav's the one who's taking the issue that takes the position that you could cut it now, and he's matchik the brisa. The brisa only means that it's possible until you cut it. But if you cut it, it's kosher. So we're still by machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav holds that it's kosher. Shmuel holds that it's possible. Shmuel will say the brisa means that it's forever possible. There's no, unless you have to take it out, untie it, and then start again. Make 4 strings and put it in the way you're supposed to. Levi also sounds like Shmuel. Also in the name of Shmuel. Some quoted the whole story that Matana had such a story that somebody else made the tzitzis string without cutting it first. He just put in one string that was folded up, and he came to Shmuel, and Shmuel said that is possible. So we're holding still by the machlokes, both by sukkah, ketzitzas and zuas yasan or not, and by tzitzis, psikas and zuas yasan. Could you make the sukkah kosher after you put up the vine by cutting it off? And could you make the tzitzis kosher after you tied it and had not yet cut it, that cut it now? So we have machlokes on the Ram, and we're still looking for proof. Top line, Meisvei. If you put the tzitzis on and then you cut the edges, it's possible. Here it says perish. There's no way out of this brisa. The brisa says you put the tzitzis on and then you cut the edges, so it's possible. That's against Rav. The Otanya, another brisa which also the Gemara thinks is going to be a kasha gabi sukkah. The first brisa was by tzitzis, and now the Gemara has a brisa by sukkah also, our subject, and the Gemara thinks is going to say also against Rav. It says, it says Basukos, Chagasukos.
But not meant to be done. Not that it's done already, but you doing it.
That's the pasuk of Tasa. It says Chagasukas Tasa Lecha. We learn out, do it. But not that it should be already have made, which means that you can't take something which is made puzzle, and then to make the puzzle kosher. You have to make the sukkah. You can't move from here. We learn This is the Brisa talking. From here is the source that if you took a vine and you put it onto the sukkah, it's possible. So that's what the Brisa says, and the Brisa needs explanation. The way it says it, it doesn't read, because it says the reason why vines are not good, mechuber vines are not good, is because that's lamanasai. That's not the reason why it's not good. As long as it's still attached, the reason why it's not good is because it's mechuber. Why does the Brisa say the reason is tas lamanasai? Tas lamanasai means that the way it is now, the finished product now is kosher, but it wasn't made. It wasn't tasa. It was made with a trick. It was made with a kunz. You made a puzzle sukkah, and then you somehow kashered it. That's
by cutting the.
Okay, that's what the Gemara is going to figure out. Echidan, what's the case of the Brisa? The Brisa doesn't say that you cut it. The Brisa does says that you put a vine on. It's possible because that's lamanasi. Echidami. What is the case of the Brisa? Ilema bishalo cuts it. If you didn't cut it, then it's still mechuber. That's the reason pas lamanasi. Maya mission tas lamanasi. Typically, the mechubarninu. It wouldn't say the reason it's possible is because it's tas lamanasi. The reason why it's possible is because it's still connected. And it must be like Chaim David said. It must be that you cut it. And the reason why it's possible because tani psula. Isn't that mamish against Rav? If he said, if the Brisa means that you put the sukkah, the schacham when it's attached, and then you cut it, and it's still possible because tas lamanasi, that you didn't make the sukkah, you made a puzzle sukkah, and then you will machshir it, and it's not good enough. So it's a perish against Rav. Rav would hold that by cutting it, you can cut it now, and also that's called an act of making the schach. Shmami no, the law meaning tzasin zuasiyas, and give to the Rav. And here you see that you don't say that cutting it is making it, and this is going to be a kasha on Rav. So here Rav says you can get out of the Brisa, you can get out of the kasha. This way you can get out of it. Here, the case is that he pulled it. The word shalaf means to pull out, pull. The lomekra asiyah to do. That it's not noticeable, it's making. So here, Rashi and Taisus both say similar pshat. Taisus says another pshat, but that's to say Rashi's pshat that technically he separated it. Technically he separated, it's not mechuber anymore. If it will be still attached, then the Brisa wouldn't say the reason why it's possible is because of Tasib Lamnasi. Would have said that's possible because it's Mechuber. So technically he detached it, but he didn't detach it in a way that's recognizable. When you look at it, it looks like it's still attached. So technically, if they're only a psul of Mechuber, we would say it's okay. It's not Mechuber. No, it's about Schach. But the fact that he cut it in a way that it's separated, but it's still, Rashi holds that it says it's still leaning on the place where it was originally attached. If you look at it, it looks attached. So technically it's kosher. But because of the psul of tas lamanasi, it's not enough to be considered that you made the sukkah now. If you mamish cut it, then it's noticeable that it's separated. So this act of cutting is not only an act of cutting, it's also an act of placing the schach onto the sukkah. You made the sukkah by doing this. But since it's not noticeable, so it's enough to be considered not mechuber, but it's still a problem of tas lamanasi. So Rav gets out of this kasha. He says that even though the Brisa here does say something about tas lamanasi, even after you cut it, but it's a kind of a cutting which is not enough of a ma'isa. But if you'd actually cut it completely, that it'll be separated from the tree, then it'll be good. So this is what Rav holds. But the Gemara says, okay, Rav got out of the second kasha. Mikam Mokum can't tell him about Kachpasa kasha, the Rav. Even though this has to point that, let's go back a second. The Gemara two kashas. There was a Brisa, this Brisa here, Mesa, tell him, this Brisa, there's no teres for this guy. Here it says, the Farish, tell him, that Rav didn't get out of. The Gemara is dealing with the set, the old Tanya, not a Brisa, that Rav was able to answer. But the first Brisa he didn't answer. That's the Brisa off over here. Mikamokom, here's the word Mikamokom, top line. The first Brisa, which is farish by tzitzis, that it wouldn't be good to cut the tzitzis after you already knotted it. So that is against Rav. Rav says it will be kosher, kasha. So that's not it is a kasha, and the truth and we paskin, the post can paskin like Shmuel, that it's not kosher. Both by sukkah, by tzitzis, it's not enough to just cut it. You have to pick it up again and put it down.
Right, that's the whole thing of you have to raise up do some pu'ula that changes that takes it out of the gather of a sukkah and then you drop it. Like
yes, and that's what the Gemara says, that according to Shmuel, that since it's not kosher but it's cutting it down, you have kosher schach, but you have to make the sukkah. So now you have to pick it up, put it down again. The Gemara thinks that it has maybe a machlokes tanam about this, even though the Gemara has a brisa against Rav. Maybe it's also a brisa that holds like Rav also. The Gemara didn't finish the fight yet. Lema ketanai. Maybe we found machlokes tanam about this, and the Gemara is going to bring a third application of this yisod. We had so far by sukkah, and by tzitzis, and now a third category. The third category doesn't come up too much by us because when you go to the shuk to buy,
But since there's no way you can fix it up yet, unless you.
you untie it, and then you cut it, and then you do it again, right? That's what we're asking by suk also. You have to pick it up, put it down again. By tzitzis, he's saying it's hard. It isn't just picking it up, putting it down. By the sukkah, it's a bit easier. Yeah. So it isn't kosher the way it is, and you have to pick it up, put it down again, or untie it and tie it again. The Gemara is going to bring a third application of this yisod, which we don't see too much. Hadassim, when you go to the shuk to buy hadassim, you don't see any berries on them. But if you go to the field, berries sometimes grow on the hadassim. And the Mishnah later on says that if you have more berries than leaves, so it's possible. You could remove the berries. It doesn't have to grow without berries. You have the berries over there. If you remove them, it's kosher. Then the Brisa says.
So why is it not the same?
We're getting to it. I'm giving introduction. This is the Brisa we're coming on to. So if you would take a hadas and take off the berries, there's no problem because you didn't put it into the lulav yet. There's nothing to do. You made you didn't make anything. I took a hadas which is possible. I made it kosher. The same way you take schach, for instance, and you take and you cut it off the ground. That's not called, you didn't do anything. That's made kosher schach. Now put it onto the sukkah. So there's no problem of taking a hadas and cutting off the berries, and then it's a kosher hadas. Put it into the lulav. But if you put it into the lulav, the Gemara is going to talk about that you tie the lulav together with the hadas and then take off the berries.
You already have the mitzvah in your hand, and it's possible. So
and now you're going to make it kosher by taking off the berries. The Gemara is going to compare. That's going to be the third application. And the case where it starts, it throws us right into the middle of the sugya of avaliktan. If you transgressed and you pick the berries. So here it's not really our subject. The fact that he transgressed. Why did he transgress? So the case over there is talking about that. It says you're not supposed to do it on Yontif. You can do it before Yontif, Halamoid, but on Sukkot itself, you're not supposed to take on Yontif. You're not supposed to take off the berries because that's called tikkun manas. Like you're making something kosher, even though it's already detached. It's not on the ground. You're not taking it off the ground. But if you have a puzzle hadas and by taking off the berries you're making it kosher, so you shouldn't do that on Yontif. If somebody did do it, if he transgressed and he did it, is the hadas puzzle or not? So the fact that he did it on Yontif, even though he was over Yontif, that's not an issue. That's not a reason why it should become puzzle. It's a little bit strange that the Gemara presents that the Mishnah presents it like this. But all the Mishnah wants to talk about is not the transgression as much as that it was already me'ugad, the lulav was already tied together with the hadassim, because on every yontif it could be that you would have taken off the berries before you put it onto the eged. But the eged, the tying of the lulav together with the hadassim and the rovas has to be done dafkan yontif. You're not allowed to make a knot. The Gemara is going that when you need an eged, if you need it to be tied, that's going to be today's sugi coming up. Do you have to tie the lulav together with the hadassim and the rovas? If you hold that you have to, so then you have to make a knot. You'd have to make a knot in order to connect all of them, to tie all of them together.
An unpermanent knot?
The Pashas is not. The Pashas is not. Now the Pashas, we'll get to that soon. Maybe people do it like that. We'll see maybe soon why people do it. But the Pashas is if you hold lulav tzarech eged, if you need that, you have to bind it together. You'd have to make a double knot, and double knot you're not allowed to make on yontif. So that's all the Gemara wanted over here. That it was already yontif and it's already bound together, and now you have these pasal hadassim that are inside the bound lulav, and now you're going to take off the berries and make it kosher. And that the Gemara is going to compare to the issue of taslam and osri. If you have a pasal hadas that's already bound in the lulav, and now you're going to take off the berries, so you didn't make it kosher, you made it pasal, and now you're being machshirid indirectly. So is that also going to be the same machlokas as Rav and Shmuel if lekitasan zuiyasiyasan? So far we had kitzitzasan zuiyasiyasan or not, and then psikasan, betzitzah zuiyasiyasan, and here also lekitasan zuiyasiyasan. That's the Gemara.
Exactly the same case.
Okay, so let's see. Let's say that's dependent on this machlokas tanah. It says in the Mishnah, Abba v'liktan, or Bryce, I forgot if it's the Mishnah or Bryce. Abba v'liktan, if you transgressed and you took off the berries off the hadas temanyantif, which means that all the more ones that it's already a good, it's already tied together, and now you take off the berries, possible, divrei Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok, v'chacham machshivin. Machlokas if it's possible kosher. And the Gemara gives an introduction to bring this proof. Savrua, we thought, they thought, the Beis Medrash, that what this proof thought, and here also is going to be tas lamonos. It means that the Gemara has to give an introduction to bring this proof because it's not so simple. By sukkah it says tasa. Chag sukkah is tasa lacha. By tzitzis it says basulam tzitzis. By lulav it doesn't say make a lulav. It doesn't say such a thing. So in order to get into this proof, it's only if you can have introduction that there's such a thing to make a lulav. So the Gemara says first of all you have to hold in order to bring this proof that lulav tzarech eged, that a lulav is supposed to be bound together with the hadasim and the ravos. Someone might say there's no such thing. You could take, same way you take the esrog separate, you could take also the lulav and the hadasim, each one separate, and you hold it all in your hand, but they're not bound together. But we'll give an introduction that lulav tzarech eged, that it is supposed to be bound together, and also even though it doesn't say Tasa, it doesn't say make the lulav, but we're going to learn out lulav from sukkah, just like a sukkah that you have to have a product that it says Tasa, Chag sukkah Tasa lecha. So to lulav that's supposed to be bound, you're supposed to make the binding. Yeah, I feel a lulav sukkah that it says over there by sukkah Tasa lamanose. So that's the introduction, the preview, not a preview, but like the introduction to this raya would be we're assuming that a lulav has to be made. But when you bind the lulav together with the dasim and the ravos, you're making the lulav, and it's a din tas lo manasei. Say if so, why should somebody say that it's kosher? The Rabbanan say it's kosher. Why is it kosher? If you put the puzzle adas into the lulav and then you're going to pick off the berries, it should be puzzle. My lab b'hakam b'fagi is the machlok is not the following of Rabban Shmuel. The man the masher sava min lulav gabi sukkah kitzitzas and zuas yasan the gabi lulav nami min lekitaz and zuas yasan that the Rabbanan the chacham machshirin. The chacham who say that it's kosher, they must hold like Rav. That says that's like Rav says by the sukkah. If you cut off the schach after it's already on top of the sukkah, it's kosher. And by tzitzis, the same thing. So too by the hadasim, you could say the kitasin, plucking off the berries off the hadasim is also good enough to be considered that now you're binding it together. And the one who says that is possible. Oman the puzzle, Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzaddik that says that it's possible. So Valamin Gabi Sukkah Kitasin Zuas Yasan, the Gabdul of Nami Lamin Kitasin Zuas Yasan. He's going to be the one to hold like Shmuel that says that it's not enough just to cut it off now. It's Tas Laman also. So if this is going to be the Machlokis, so then it comes out that everybody hold not the Machlokis. Rav and Shmuel, even though there's a brisa against Rav before, but here at least the Rabbanan Chachamim they hold like Rav. So this is good for Rav that Rav found an opinion of Chachamim that say that the Likitas and Zuas Yasan. But the Gemara knocks it down. The Gemara is going to knock it down on two possibilities. Let's say introduction first, and then we'll preview. Then we'll see what the Gemara is going to say. It isn't at all simple that lulav tzarech eged. Who says that you have to bind it together? Maybe you don't have to bind it together. Maybe there's no such din. And even if there is such a din, maybe there's no din of tas lamanasa. It doesn't say make a lulav, make a lulav. The Gemara said before, introduced that we're assuming that lulav has to be bound together with the adasim and the rovas, and also you learn lulav from sukkah tas lamanasa. But it doesn't. Those two things are not givens. Those two things are flexible. We might say that not a variable. We might say that it's not true. That's what the Gemara is going to say. The Gemara says, "Lo, not necessarily so. There's no proof to Rav. Nobody else like Rav. That it's not enough to cut the schach after it's already on top of the sukkah. So why is the kosher according to Rabbanan? Is there such a psul of tasa? Even if you hold that a lulav doesn't have to be bound together with the dasim and the rovos, but who says tasa? It doesn't say tasa. It just says you should have such a end product that there should be a lulav bound together with, but it doesn't say make it. If it doesn't say make it, it's no din of loman osei. If it says tasa, then we learn out loman osei. But it doesn't say tasa. So only because you assumed that you learn it out from sukkah, but that's not a given. So the Rabbanan will say that they hold that there's no din of tasa. You don't learn out from sukkah that you have to make the lulav. That's why it's kosher. If you have to make it, then by plucking off the berries, it's not called making it. The reason why it's kosher is because you don't have to make it in the first place. If boys say you don't have to make, it doesn't say tasa. If boys say, then we can even be more extreme and say, whoever said that the lulav has to be bound together with the dasim and the ravos. The reason why it's kosher is because no such din. If you want to, you could hold the dasim and the ravos separate. You don't have to bind it together at all. If you would theoretically have held that lulav has to be bound together, then we would have held that taslam and asui, and it's not considered asui if it's just going to pluck it off. We would have all held that you learn out lulav from sukkah taslam and asui, and it's not going to be kosher because plucking off the berries now does not make it considered made now. But here the machlokes is ma'asav tzarech eged and ma'asav ein tzarech eged. The reason the Rabbanan say it's kosher is because they hold it doesn't have to be bound together with challah. There's no din that the lulav should be bound together with the hadasim. So the hadasim, if they're bound, this is good. If not being bound, and you could pluck it off after it's bound, as if it would have not been bound yet either. Now the Gemara is here ready, so it's going to go open up the machlokes, open up the window. About this point, is the lulav supposed to be bound together with the hadasim and the ravos? So what do we know? We know we do it. We see that people do that. We make kosher kolach, whatever, a tabaot, and you put the nasim together with the ravos. But here's where the Gemara talks about it. Two lines before it spreads, this is machlokes between the following tanam. If the lulav has to be bound together with the adasim and the ravos. The Tani, we learned in a brayso, lulav ben lav ben she'en avid kosher. The Tana Kama says no difference if it's bound together with the adasim or ravos or not, it's kosher. You can take all four species separated, hold it in your hand, and it's kosher. The same way the esrog is not bound together, so the das and Rav is also not bound together. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, all good. All good kosher, she'ena all good possible. Top line, that he holds no, only if it's bound together it's a kosher, if not, not. So the Brisa that says before that you can pluck it off after it's already bound is because there's no din that should be bound together b'chlal, so it's not called tasla manasi. Like more wants to know what's the reason Rabbi Yehuda that has to get from it, that has to be bound together. Doesn't say any place. The Torah says, "L'kachtem lochem be'yom harishon creates a door kapos tamarim and afitzavas havina." It doesn't say about bound together. Why is it so simple? Why is it not simple? Why is it?
You take them together.
Okay, so the esrog also you take together. They don't bind it together. You take it all together. We're not saying you should pick up one, then put that down, take the net one, but take them all together in your hands. But who says you have to bind it
Once
together?
I'm holding it together, and at that point I'm plucking the berries. It's like together.
No. There's only a din of tasla manasi. If there's such a din that you have to bind it, but you didn't bind it, there's no din to bind it according to Rabbana. And Rabbi Yehuda, you have to bind it, and that's why he'll say that it's possible if you bound it and then you took off the berries. That's when it's a problem.
I'm trying to say that the lakicha makes it. It's
There's no
binding
tacit.
without
There's no tacit. There's no. You're not making anything.
You've been commanded. Lakicha, lekatachem, and then he gives you the list.
You're taking it after you pluck the berries. You pluck the berries, and then you take it. And if you take it holding your hand, doesn't make a difference. The mitzvah is going to be after you. The mitzvah of ulakachtem is after you plucked it. It doesn't make a difference if you plucked it while it's in your hand.
To pluck it while it's in your hand.
So the Gemara wants to know what from where does Rabbi Yehuda get that he's supposed to bind them together? This thing of binding the adasim together with Ravas together with the lulav, where's it come from? My time of Rabbi Yehuda, where's it get it from? Yalach lakicha me Gudas Eizov. He learns Xer Shava that it says by Gudas Eizov by Pesach and the Mitzrayim. It says they should take Agudas Eizov and dip it into the blood and put the blood on the doorpost. Over there it says ulukachtem Agudas Eizov. Ksif Hasam over there by Pesach ulukachtem Agudas Eizov. Take a bundle of Eizov. Ksif Hacha. Etc. It says also lokachtem. Let's go over there. The word lokachtem means a bundle. Here too, it's a bundle. What's it going to be a bundle of? A bundle of the lulav together with the dasim and the ravos. Rabbanan, how come they want to argue? It's nice gzeir shava. Rabbanan lakicha lo yalfin. They don't have this gzeir shava. Gzeir shava Rashi brings down. It's not something you can invent. It has to be something out of a Masorah for, and they didn't have this Masorah. Who's the author of the following brisa? Lulav mitzvah lagdol v'lo of kosher. It's achatchili. You should bind it together with the dasim and the ravos. But if you did it, it's still kosher. Who's the author? We have machlokas if you need it or not. If you need it, you need it. If you don't need it, you don't need it. Rabbi Yehuda kilo ogden al kosher. But Rabbi Yehuda it's not kosher, but the evidence says it's possible, like I said before, and the first line ain't no ogden possible. So it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. You are born on my mitzvah. Even achatchili, why do you need it? This brisa is going to one that you don't need it. But umishum shenem as a kelev and vei was not the fun of a mitzvahs. It's a hidden mitzvah that it should be bound together. Not that it's a chiyuv, not that you have to, but it's more beautiful if the hadassim are together with the hadassim and the ravos are together with the lulav. It's more beautiful. That's the end of the sugya. What did we learn? One sugya. There's one. Some other sugyas came on the way, but one main sugya. Do you say kitzitzasan zu asiyasan? Do you say psikasan zu asiyasan? Do you say likitasan zu asiyasan? Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. The person like Shmuel. The more brought that there's a fresh brisa like Shmuel. And there was no proof that Rabbi anybody. So the poskim, Shmuel and Levi, they all held that you don't say psikasan zu asiyasan. So that's what we paskin, and therefore by the sukkah, if you put this pasal schach on first and then you cut it off, the mechuber schach, and then you cut it off, it's not good. You have to pick it up, put it down again.
It's a clear cut.
Even if it's a clear cut, yes. And also, yes, and also by the sisters, if you put it in when it's still all one string, it's not enough just to cut it. You have to take it apart and put it, and then cut it, put it together again, and by it happens to be by the Hadassah, we hold like the Rabbanan that there's no din of tas at all. There's no din of eged. You don't have to have the eged. There's only a hiddur mitzvah to be margaret together.
So
Before,
by tzitzis and by sukkah, there isn't.
There's not here also. If theoretically, if there be such a din, also wouldn't be allowed to do it. But behold, there's no din at all that it should be a good. It's only it's not the fun of a mitzvah. It's only hiddur mitzvah that it should be bound together. Just to point out that the Gemara is clear that if you hold lulav tzarech eged, it has to be a double knot that you're not allowed to do on yontif. And the question is, do we do a double knot? When we make the kosher gloch and the rings, I forgot how they call them in Yiddish, the rings that they make from the lulav. So tabaot, yeah, in Yiddish. Kosher gloch is also kosher gloch is Hebrew. Kosher gloch also became Yiddish Hebrew. But anyway, if you put the hadasim together with that, is that a double knot? Is that good enough? The pasha says it's not a double knot. It's not a double knot. It just goes around. But it could be that since you pass like the Rabbanan, that you don't have to have a Maisa Eged. The rest has to be the result. Should be that should be bound together. As long as it holds together, is good enough. So the minig is to make these kosher pluch and tabaot, even though it's not considered a kesher. There's some that are machmer to make a double not mamish. But based on this gemara, that's only a hiddur mitzvah. It could be that you don't need it. You don't have to have mamish double not. The Mishnah brings down.
In the end of Erev Pesach, in the Erev Sukkot, 20 minutes before Sukkot, I realized I didn't put together my agud. So what happens in such a case? I usually get it together the last 5 minutes before.
Okay,
So what I do?
So if you have the time still, so you can make a knot. But I think that the Mishnah Berurah says, he means on a sefer, he means on a sefer that says that the way the minig to make these tabaot is good enough. And he says the point is that it should hold together. Maybe he's going, I don't remember what he says, but it could be that according to Rabbanan, according to Yehuda, probably you have to have a double knot. It must be pretty clear. But according to Rabbanan, that says it's not the fun of a mitzvah, it could be that it's good enough as long as it's held together with a rubber band, with azikonim, whatever. It could be as good enough. Okay.
I don't see. It says the kichul lo yafina.
Yes. Because they didn't have such a tradition. They didn't have a Masorah. Gzer Shav was only if you have.
Kichul stay up from the having Masorah.
Yeah, that when you that's interesting. So they talk about Gzer Shav that sometimes when you have Gzer Shav is the point. Let me just see if I still about it over here. Yeah, you see Tosfos over here. Lakicha, the Reish Pekdushin. Afina kicha mistef. Afina Gzer Shav. The Lakicha. There's kicha. What does it say about what's the word over there? It doesn't say Lakicha. And that here says ulakachtem. Kach. So that's one, and this is different. This is ulakachtem. It's a different word. So even though it had a Masorah for that one, they didn't have a Masorah for this. Okay, good, beautiful. Okay, you got a Tosfos over there.
What's the binding by Kichet? It's there from.
No binding over there. It's going to be whatever means kesef. Kicha b'kesef. Over there's going to be kesef. Doesn't anything about binding over.
So why use that as an example? Because we're talking about
no, Moshe had a different kash. That's how you do. You find a different Gzer Shav someplace else. So that's a different Gzer Shav. That's about kicha means kesef. It doesn't have anything to do with binding over there. Zaklal. The Mishnah continued and said that the klolim, the rules, what you have to have for schach is that it should not be makabel tumah. It should not be vulnerable to tumah, and that it should grow from the ground. And also the Mishnah said before about it shouldn't be mechuber, it shouldn't be attached to the ground. And now we're going to go into these second two klolim that it should not be susceptible to tumah and it should be growing from the ground. Banani mili. What's the source for all this? So a little introduction. Whenever the Gemara says banani mili, it doesn't mean to say that they took the Sefer Torah and they looked and they figured out from the pasuk this halacha. This is called drushes after the fact. After we know the fact, where's their remes written in the Torah? So even though sometimes they're far drushes, like it's not as far from the simple reading, even on the drash world it might be pretty far, but we're not looking for a source to extract the halacha, we're looking for after the fact, where the Torah hinted to this. But it has some drushes that
it's a remes, not
it's a remes. Yes, but yes, not sure I'm a forest, and it's not even the pshat. And even the drash, sometimes there are drushes that are only after the fact, not that they extracted the drusha from there. And we're going to see the drush is not such a simple drush. It's going to be pretty broad. But I think that it's more comfortable if you know that this is after the fact, to find the remes. Sometimes it's not called even, it's only a slight remes. It's called only asmachta. That it's not even called a drusha. It's called only an asmachta. It's not a real drusha. This is going to be, we know the Allah Moshe Sinai, but there's enough of a drush to say that there's a source in the Torah. Not that that's where they extracted it from, but that's what we could see that Torah meant to hint to us. What's the source that these are the conditions for schach, that it should not be mikabel tumah and it should grow from the ground. Right. Amar Shlokish. Amar Kro. The pasuk in Bereshit talks about creation. It says that a cloud rose from the ground. So, and that it's a Vishkas Kopanei Adamo, and then it rained and it gave watered all of the earth. But what do you see over there? That the cloud rose from the earth. To know that a cloud is not makabel tumah, the Gemara is going to make a drash to say that the cloud is not makabel tumah and the cloud comes from the earth. So how do you know that it's not makabel tumah? Rashi says because in order to be makabel tumah, only the pasuk says it's makabel tumah. The pasuk talks about food and drink, humans, kalim. It doesn't say anything about clouds being makabel tumah. If it doesn't say so, it's not makabel tumah. You don't need the pasuk for that. But how do you know that the cloud is considered that it rises from the ground? The pasuk says that means that the cloud is considered that it grows from the ground. It grows, doesn't grow, but it rises from the ground. Here it says, at least and the Ma'aseh Bereshis. So now we learn out, that Moshe will say in a second, we're going now on Nani Yaakov. The sukkahs, the mitzvah that Hashem said you should make sukkahs, according to the Mandama, that the reason why we make sukkahs is because in the midbar, in the wilderness, Hashem surrounded Am Yisrael with clouds of glory. So if the sukkah that we're reminiscing or symbolizing is the clouds of glory, so what's a cloud? Here it says a cloud is something which is not makabel tama, and it comes from the ground. Ma aid, a cloud, a mist, is not makabel tama, and it goes from the ground. It comes up from the ground. Av sukkah dav shem makabel tama, v'gedulim ha'aretz. That would be a nice source if you hold that the sukkahs of Anani Yaakov, the clouds of glory with the sukkahs in the midbar, so that would be a good source to say, Hashem says, make such clouds. You can make a cloud, but you have these characteristics that are similar, that it's not makabel tama, and it comes from the ground.
But when he's makabel tuma all the time, it's mechubar. But once it's, even when it's not, still not makabel tuma.
Right, you have
Did
to
you make it dimana? Did you make it?
So you have to use things that are not made into a kli. You have to use
Very nice.
but the Moshe says this is only good if you hold that the sukkahs in the midbar were Anani Yaakov. But we know that's not simple. That's according to the Mandam or Abu Lezer. We'll see in a second that he holds that the sukkahs that were symbolizing were the clouds of glory. That they had actual sukkahs, they had actual tents in the midbar. There's no source. The whole source you brought is that a cloud is not makabel tama, grows from the ground. But sukkahs mamish, you don't know what that is. The Tanya, we learned machlokes. What is the sukkahs? The sukkahs of Shafti is b'nei Yisrael. The pasuk says that you should sit in sukkahs because I've sat b'nei Yisrael in sukkahs in the midbar. Anani Yakavadayu, they were Abu Lezer. Abu Lezer says they were clouds of glory. Abu Kiva Omer, sukkahs mamash asulan. They were actual sukkahs that they sat in. I'd like to say at the point that I think it's partial that everybody agrees that around each family he didn't have clouds of glory. Around each family he had an oil, like it says many times in the psukim. Or Ish Pesach Ohalo, Ohalehem. It says sure they had they didn't have clouds of glory around each family. And everybody holds that there was not one big sukkah around the Machne, there were clouds of glory. Everybody agrees they were both. Everybody agrees that there were clouds of glory around the Machne. Everybody agrees they were individual sukkahs for each family. And the question is, when Hashem said, the sukkah station we keep, B'sukkah Shafti, what is he referring to? To the ones around the whole Machne, which were Anani Yaakov, or the ones around each family, which were sukkahs mamish. So Abu Lezer says it's for the Anani Yaakov, but the keeper says it's for the actual sukkahs. So Anichel, the most chazing over the cash again. If you hold like Abu Lezer, they're Anani Yaakov, so this will be a good source. The clouds come from the ground, and they're makabel tuma. That a sukkahs mamish. How do you know that the schach is supposed to be not makabel tuma and going from the ground? So the Gemara that was a Rish Lakish when according to Abu Lezer. But he's going to say a drash according to Abu Kiva that says sukkahs mamish. We'll still find out.
There's a whole cloud of glory.
Yes. And the drash will be according to Rish Lakish's drash. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan is going to explain according to Abu Kiva. Abu Kiva says that sukkahs mamish. How do you know that the schach has to be not makabel tuma and gedulim ha'aretz? Which we had to pasuk a couple of times already, and also the Gemara made a drash before that Chag could mean Chagiga. That's not only a holiday, but it means the Korban Chagiga. Here the Gemara is going to do the same thing again and say that the Chag is referring to the Korban Chagiga. Maki Sukkah Chagiga. There's a comparison of the pasuk, the Sukkahs to the Korban Chagiga. A Chagiga is an animal. Ma Chagiga dav shena makabel tuma b'gedulim ha'aretz. Av Sukkah dav shena makabel tuma b'gedulim ha'aretz. Just like an animal is not susceptible to tuma as long as it's alive. Once it's dead, it itself becomes tumah. But when it's alive, it's not susceptible to tumah. And also, it's called that it gets nourished from the ground. That's not so simple. There's an animal called, it doesn't grow out of the ground. But the fact that it gets nourishment from the ground, that might be called gedulim ha'aretz. Rashi brings other places.
I saw that recently. How is that possible? You can call an animal.
Because it lives off the ground. It lives off the ground.
Born from a womb of another animal.
Yes, but it lives off the ground. It lives off the ground, and
That's
therefore.
Enough to call it gedulim ha'aretz.
So, and Rashi brings down other places. The Gemara says the same thing.
Right,
It's nutrition. The fact that so Rashi brings down also by Ma'aser Sheni. Also, the Gemara says over there that when Asat Takesha Tavan Avshecha, and over there it says Babaku Batzon. It says Gedulei Karka. The Gemara calls over there also that animals are called Gedulei Karka, and our Gemara is happy with that. We'll come back to this Rashi in a second, but just to continue the Gemara. So far the Gemara has a good drash that even if you hold sukkahs mamish, the schach has to be made of things that are not makabel tuma and grow from the ground because it's similar to chagiga. Just like a korban chagiga has those characteristics that it's not makabel tuma. A live animal is not susceptible to tuma and also it gets nutrition from the ground. So too, the schach has to have those two characteristics. But the Gemara says that's too good a drasha. Ima chagiga b'alei chayim, afsukanami b'alei chayim. It's too good means that I mean to say that it's too limiting. That you might say it has to be mamish like a korban chagiga. It means it should be an animal. Maybe the schach only could be animals. You have to use nafka animals. Not a living animal. It could be shechted already. You can use skins, but maybe only it has kosher. It has to be mamish. Who said you're limiting it only to these two aspects? That it's not makabel tuma and it goes from the ground. Maybe it has to be mamish and balei chayim, and that's not true. You know that schach doesn't have to be balei chayim. we're going to go
The
for
moment it dies, it's tumor, it's the male.
Yeah, no, we know that.
not makabel tumah. If you're going to take an animal which does the skins alone and it's not makabel tumah, so it wasn't processed in order to be makabel tumah, so then it would have been kosher schach. That's the point. Before we go further, the
Sorry,
Rashi,
I don't want to waste time, but you shech the animal and now you have a skin. The animal's tummy.
first of all, if you shechted an animal, the animal's not the tummy. If you shechted an animal, it's not tummy. Only if it died. The nevela, treifa.
Oh.
You said shechted and you said tummy. That's not true.
Shechted is not a tummy.
When you have meat in your freezer, it's
That's
tummy.
true. That's true.
Not
What
tummy.
am I talking about?
Yes,
It's
but-
only if it was treifa or what?
An nevela. Even a treif is also not tummy. If you shechted a treif.
Okay.
But only the Bela. But the Gemara, so the Gemara's not happy with this because according to this drasha, you should have to use dafka animals for schach. And it's not true. You don't have to have animals. You also have to have anything which is not makabel tumah that grows. So the Gemara is going to continue. We'll continue in a second. But as Rashi has a point over here in the previous daf that he says that, just let me take this off a second. I did something over here, but one second.
Whatever you do is right.
I meant to do something else. 1 second. I meant to do this. Yeah. Back to 20 over here. Rashi at the bottom here, and the previous Amud Beis. So Rashi says that even though Gemara says that skins of animals will be kosher schach, like why not? You might say why not? It's kosher schach. If the Gemara says that it's called growing from the ground, not makabel tumah, so it should be kosher schach. So everybody should be using hides for a schach. Isn't
Strips.
why strips? Make a big fat.
Again, I want to see.
Even if you want to see some stars and stuff,
something.
you can make one place in the sukkah where you see stars. Doesn't have to be the whole sukkah you see stars, but you can have a very nice schach made out of hides. So Rashi here says don't use hides because even though Agamor does say that the animals are considered doable like karka, but it's not so simple. Rashi says don't be some Agamor since Agamor is going to fall off of this terrace right away because we just said maybe any dafka animals. That's not true. So therefore Rashi says don't be some this Gemara and we don't use hides for a schach. So this Gemara, even though it would have been a nice possibility, the might say we don't do that.
What's the cute? What did he call it?
We just said that. We said the kasha was you should have to have dafka animals. Top line on the next page. That's not true. So we slug up. We don't use this drasha. And now the Gemara is still looking for a drasha. How do you know that the schach has to be namakabel tumah and growing from the ground? Yes, Rabban Rabbi Yochanan, still Rabbi Yochanan, but now before Zavdimi, now it's Rabban. Rabban, the name of Rabbi Yochanan says, you should make the sukkah, the Pashut Pshat means at the season of the Tishrei, when you gather in from your granary and from your the wine vat. But the Gemara is dashing, you should make it with the aspacha. You should make it with that. You should make it with that material. You should make it with the soul is going v'yakav b'kasam adav. You should use it with the leftover of the goren. The goren means the granary, and over there the psolis is going to, the leftover is going to be the straw, the plant part, not the actual berries. And also the yekvecha, the psolis again means not the yekav itself, the wine, but it's going to mean the grapes, the wine. It's going to mean the psolis is going to be the eshkolot, the clusters and all the vines, and that's things which are not makabel tumah, and they are growing from the ground. So that's the drasha that we're happy with, that the source that you know that the schach has to be made of things that are not makabel tumah and grow from the ground is because it says, and the drasha is the psolas from the psolas of the granary and the vat. The Gemara says, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say psolas. Who put the word psolas in? Maybe the actual grain and the actual yakev, which would mean the grapes and the wheat, the kernels, which are makabel tumah. According to your drash psolas, it means not makabel tumah. But who says doesn't say psolas? It doesn't say, you put in the word psolas. Say if it's not the psolas, if it's the actual food, this food is makabel tumah. So how can we say that you're learning out from here that you have to have things which is not makabel tumah? It says Yaakov. Yaakov actually says is the vat that the wine falls into. So that's wine. So if it was say grapes, maybe you're right. You can make schach out of grapes, but it's not. Doesn't say it. It says wine. You can't make schach out of wine. So it doesn't mean. Obviously, it doesn't mean wine. You're not gonna. How can you make schach out of wine? So it must mean that it's the psolis. It's only the vines and not the actual grape or wine, because it says. It can't be the wine if you say Yaakov Atzmo, so it must mean the psolas. And the word jumps that it means the branches and not the actual grapes. But the Gemara says no. Who says you can't make schach out of wine? It's like a real a real far-fetched thing, but the Gemara again, it's a premise to find, and it has to fit into the drush, and it doesn't fit into the drush. The Gemara's going to say there's a way technically how you can make schach out of wine. And sneer, which was said to be recently in the parsha, sneer, Hachemon is called sneer. So it says over there, it says that they used to have congealed wine. They would take wine and dehydrate it. They would get congealed wine. I don't know why they did it. Maybe in order to be able to later use it as a concentrate. They would have congealed wine, like a goulet vela. It would be like a fig cake, the same kind of thing. And it had a consistency to it.
Yeah.
There wasn't a liquid. So maybe that's what the Torah means. Make a schach. If you want to use wine, you can make wine to be schach. Make some kind of, they say goulet vela, these congealed wine cakes. So of course, the Torah doesn't mean that. But the more saying you have to fit your drush into the pasuk, and the pasuk doesn't say. Where do you have any remnants in the pasuk that it's not that it has to be so is going to be echo? Rav Zera is the one who explained. Rav Zera said a couple months ago that he can't make schach out of wine, and he thought it's a nice drusha. But now the Yemi asked the kash on it. Rav Zera said we had this shot, and it was a nice shot. That's a good source of the psalms. But the Yemi came, he threw an axe into it. Like how do you say, like a stick in the wheel? He stopped the drusha, and I have no answer. He has a good kasha. But now the Gemara supports the drusha.
What's his argument?
He said maybe you're going to use congealed wine.
Oh,
Rav Ashi Yamar, no, the drush is good. Rav Yochanan's drush is good. Mi garnacha, look at the man. Mi garnacha. Mi garnacha. V'lo yagar natzmo. Mi yikvecha. There's baspacha mi garnacha. So it means not the yekev itself, not the garn itself. If we would say garnacha yikvecha, then it means the grain and the wine, or the grapes. But it doesn't say that. It says mi garnacha, mi yikvecha. So then it means not the actual garn v'yekev, but the soulless. Mi garnacha v'lo garn natzmo. Mi yikvecha v'lo yekev asmo.
You don't have to say that the congealed wine is the sod, because it's from the fruit.
That's the fruit itself. That's not so. That's the fruit itself.
That's the reason.
That's the more saying. Since it says the mem, the migornacha, miyikvecha, now we learn that it means psolas, and it means dafka that the branches, the clusters, that's what's kosher, but the actual fruit is not kosher.
Right.
And that's the answer. So we have a drash. Before we started off with the drash, if you hold that the Nani Yaakov, because the clouds is Ejalim and Oris and it's not Makabel Tuma, and if you hold that Sukkot Mamish, then the drash is going to be because it says Baspacha, migornacha, miyikvecha, that's what the Sukkot is supposed to be made out of. The truth is that the first Rosh also can learn out of here also. If you hold that it's Nani Yaakov, but the Ma'aser, the Torah says how to make the sukkah. It says to make it out of things that have sauce garn v'yakin. Another source, which I don't know how it's a source, but it says that in times of Ezra and Nehemiah, the pasuk in Nehemiah, the pasuk ends off lasos sukos kakosuk. Over there was a big campaign to make sukkahs. They haven't made sukkahs, as they made everyone go out to make sukkahs. So it says they want to go to the mountain and bring olive leaves and leaves of Eit Shemen, a certain kind of a wood. Eit Shemen, those leaves, and hadas leaves, and date leaves, and alei Eitzavos leaves of Eitzavos, which the Gemara says right away is also hadas. And over there, that it says over there how you make a sukkah. And it happens to be all those things making a sukkah out of are things that are not makabel tuma, and also growing from the ground. That's what's kosher for a sukkah for schach. So it's not a pasuk in the Torah; it's a pasuk in the Nevi'im. And what it says, that's what they used. So that's going to be the source. That's what you need for schach. I don't think it's a good source. That doesn't mean as a source because it's not in the Torah; it's in the Ksuvim. But that shows us that that's what they use for schach. The Gemara ends off with a side point. Hainu hadas, hainu eitzavos. The pasuk says two things. Both of them are the same thing. What does hadas mean? A myrtle, right? Then it says eitzavos. Eitzavos is also a myrtle. So what does it say? Same thing over again. Hainu hadas, hainu eitzavos. It's the same thing. Amrav Chisda hadas shotel l'sukkah. Eitzavos l'lula. This is all talking about sukkah over there. So for sukkah you can take alei hadas. But eitzavos means when it's triple. In a way that we're going to see later on. Everybody knows that hadas is supposed to be 3 leaves coming out symmetrically on the same level each time. So mishulash. So that's what it says. Alei eitz avos, and doing that for a lulav. But for the sukkah, you don't have to have that. So you can use any kind of branches. Mm-hmm. So then a kli maybe it's called hadashot. Hadashot means when you have hadas, the leaves are not growing symmetrically. They're not growing 3/8 mishulash, and that's the kosher for the sukkah, of course, like any kind of branches, but not for the lulav. So we finish the sukkah.
Why did you bring it down? It doesn't help us with our proof. It's just an additional idea.
We brought so we finished. That's the side point. This is in parentheses. We finished the pasuk, and it ends by the word eitzavos. That's the end of the drasha. And then the Gemara in parentheses says, "What's the difference between hadas and eitzavos?" The Gemara says that the eitzavos was for the lulav, but that's not a get to us. That's in parentheses. These from the word hainu till the end is in parentheses a side point. Once we mention the pasuk, we said a side point also. So just to sum up.
Rashi says it's so hard. It says in Rashi,
Yes.
That's the source of this passage. That was what we learned from this passage.
Yes. True. But then the end of the Gemara is bringing down, I know Adas, and there's no side point. The Gemara brings a side point at the end. That's not to get to the drasha. What's the difference between Adas and Eitzavos? It's not to get to drasha. We finished the drasha already. So it says that Eitzavos is for the Lulu. So what was the sugya? What is this?
Sorry, did you read the last thing about Shota? I didn't understand that.
The Gemara is kasha. I knew Adas, I knew Eitzavos. This is in parentheses. You can put in parentheses if you like. Let me just put in parentheses for everybody. Not showing up. Okay, my parentheses not working over here. But this word on.
You read Rav Hista?
This one second. It's coming in a second. It takes time. 1 second. Okay, it's a second, but okay, not taking such a second. This here it is. Okay. This was not relevant to the source. We already bought the raya. The raya was because it says the pasuk bring all kinds of tree leaves to make the sukkah. That's the end of our drasha. In the Chemi it says go to the mountain and bring all kinds of leaves, olive leaves, and shemen leaves, hadas leaves, and date leaves, and Eitzavos leaves. So that's the raya that's what's kosher for a sukkah. Only things that are similar to all these things, that means it goes from the ground and it's not makabel tumah. The leaves are not makabel tumah. The Gemara says a side point now. In the pasuk it says hadas and it says Eitzavos. It's the same thing. Everybody knows that Eitzavos is hadasim. So it says the same thing over again. So the Gemara answers that it's coming to tell you that the hadasim that are mishulashim, that 3 on the level, use that for the lulav. If they're not, that's kosher for the sukkah, of course, but it's not good for the lulav. The Gemara says inside, I know hadas, I know Eitzavos. It's the same thing. Why does it say two things in the pasuk that are the same? Rav Chisda, hadas shota. Hadas shota means a crazy hadas. Why is it a crazy hadas? Because it's not symmetrical. A normal hadas is shulashim. They're triple leaves. And the one that doesn't have triple leaves, it has 2 and 1 or 1 and 1 and whatever. If it doesn't have the way a hadas is supposed to be, it's called a crazy hadas. So that's kosher for the sukkah. Eitzavos. If it's triple, then it's kosher for the lulav. Is that good? Everybody happy with that?
3 touching is good.
Yeah.
It's not a sugya, but we're not talking about Hadasim, we're just talking about Sukkah. It came in that there's such thing as Eitzavos, it has to be for Hadasim. To finish the sugya, we just talked about how do you know the source is supposed to be Namakabel Tumah and growing from the ground. If you hold Anani cover, the source will be from, you can have a nice source from the Eid Yalam and Oretz. If not, you'd have to have these other drushes. And also, everyone uses these drushes over here that it says that it's with Pshol's going to be because of Madaba. When it says, also you see in the Chembi, that's what they use. The mice, they use leaves, they're Namakabel Tumah, and they are growing from the ground. So we came out that there are 3 psulim. One is if it's growing from the ground, Mechuber, and also if it's Namakabel Tumah, and it has to be Namakabel Tumah, and also has to grow from the ground. Rashi points out in the Mishnah, a page ago, on after the Aleph, I think, the page before, that the Psul of Mechuber, what does it talk about? Where are you learning out from? Rashi also says from this point, when you gather, so it's not anymore connected.
Yeah.
So that's Rashi's own drasha. The Gemara doesn't say so. Rashi made a drasha to say how you know that Mechuber is not good. The Gemara continues, Mishnah continues. Chavile kash, chavile eitzim, chavile zradim, ein mesachim b'hem. You can't use bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of zradim. Zradim is some kind of a growth that Rashi says is animal food or it's used for straw. Also, once it gets dried up, I forgot what we called it once upon a time. We had a name for
Moss, maybe? Moss?
No. So it says if you can make a bundle out of that. But here it says that you have bundles. It doesn't make a difference, this particular thing. It's also similar to wood and straw. It's kosher schach, but you made a bundle out of it. And cane?
I have down twigs, just the word twig.
Yeah, you're also good. Okay. So it says,
Doge, in the Yiddish.
okay, ein mesachim b'hem. It's not kosher for schach. You're not supposed to use it for schach. Now, why not? It's kosher schach. It's wood. It's straw. What's the problem? Twigs, because it's a bundle. Some problem with a bundle. What's the problem? We'll see in the Gemara. A bundle is a problem. A bundle is no good. The kulam sheitim ksheres. If you untie it, it's not a bundle anymore. Now it's kosher. The kulam ksheres letfanos. Everything we said, the whole Mishnah, this Mishnah, Mishnah before, there's no requirements for the walls. It can, of the material. It can be made out of a kabel tumah. It can be made mechuber. It can be made not growing from the ground. It can be bundles, whatever you want. There's no requirements, restrictions for what the walls have to be made out of. Amar Rav Yaakov. Rav Yaakov said, Shemoyis or Shamis, depends how you say it in Volotzin over there. Shamis Minei, the Rabbi Yochanan Tarti. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan two things. Shemoyis is Shamati. In Hebrew, it will be Shamati. How you say it in Aramaic is the Yud before the Tuf. In Hebrew, it will be Shamati. In Aramaic, it's American. Shmoyis. So Shmoyis, Basrai called Zia Sagi or Shamis. Okay, different ways how to say it. So I heard Shamati. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan two things. It means that two Mishnayos. We have so one Mishnah is going to be our Mishnah over here. This Mishnah is going to be the Mishnah of Chavila Kash, bundles of straw. Another Mishnah is coming up soon in Daf Tezvav. And Rabbi Yochanan said Pshat in both of these Mishnayos. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan two things. The parish of two Mishnayos. Chadaha, one our Mishnah, we just learned about bundles of straw. V'idach, another Mishnah, Achotet v'gadish lasos sukkah and a sukkah. The Mishnah says if somebody dug in, Achotet is to dug in. He dug into a haystack. It was a haystack, and he dug into the haystack, and now he has a sukkah. Hey, it's kosher schach. So he dug into the haystack, and now he's sitting in a beautiful sukkah. He has hay all around him, and also on top of him, and he has a sukkah. So it says no, it's not a good sukkah. Why is our Mishnah no good, and why is the Mishnah over there no good? So I'll just give a little introduction, and then we'll see what the Gemara says. If you would have made the bundles, you put this, bundles usually are made, you take bundles and you put it on the roof in order to dry up. You bring bundles of straw, wood, you bring from the field, you want to dry it out. If you did that, you didn't make it for sale, you didn't make it for shade. So if someone would have used that for the sukkah, if he had put bundles of wood to dry out over his sukkah, it wouldn't be a kosher sukkah because it's not made for sale. It's not made for shade. It's made to dry out. True?
Right.
That would be a psul deraisa. Also, Chativ Begadish, if at the other Mishnah, he made a haystack. What did he make a haystack for? To pile up the hay, nothing to do with any shade. And then he would dig out the inside and go inside. Also, it's possible with the raisa because it wasn't made for shade. Everyone knows you have to have shade. It wasn't made for shade. So either one of these Mishnahs, you could have learned that it's a psul deraisa because it wasn't made for shade. Good? So far, good?
Yeah.
The other case, and I'll go back both Mishnahs, like I said, both of them, the rice is good. What if he would have put up the bundles for shade? He took the bundles, he put it on top of the sukkah for shade. He did it for shade. It might be possible in Rabbanan because sometimes people do it for drying out. So maybe I'm going to pass it, even if you did it for shade, but people are going to see that you put bundles on top of a sukkah. That looks like a regular bundle you put up for drying. So we might we might say with Rabbanan, we might say that's possible because you might come to do it also for shade, also for drying out. Also the Mishnah of Chotet Begadish. What if somebody made a haystack with the intention that he's going to dig it out and use it for shade? So he's piling up a haystack for shade, and then he dug out the inside, and it's kosher sukkah because he made it for shade. But you might say that Rabbanan is not going to be good because people don't know that. People will think the same thing. So both of these Mishnahs you can learn one or two ways. The Mishnah of Chavila Kash, our Mishnah about bundles of straw, or the Mishnah coming up about Chotet Begadish, that he's digging into a Gadish, you can learn that it's the rice or the Rabbanan. Either he did it for shade and it's only possible with Rabbanan, or he did it not for shade and it's possible with the rice. Rabbi Yochanan said that these two Mishnahs, one of them is possible with the rice because he didn't do it for shade, and the other one is possible with Rabbanan. Even though he did it for shade, it's possible with Rabbanan because you might not do it for shade. That's what the Gemara is going to talk about.
You can say it's a fence. It's a fence. It's a fence. It's not a line.
I'm Rabbi Yaakov. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan two things. One our Mishnah, Pshat in our Mishnah, the one of Chavila Kash. The Idach and the other Mishnah also he explained. If somebody dug into a haystack in order to make a sukkah, it's not a good sukkah. And what did he say? Rabbi Yochanan said Pshat in both Mishnah, both Mishnahs. Chad Mishim Gezeres also. Chad Mishim Taslo Monosei. One of the Mishnahs he explains only a possible Rabbana. Gzeira Otsa. Otsa means that you didn't do it for shade. You just made it in order to store it away, to dry it, to store it. And the reason why it's possible is because Gzeira. So you might come to do an Otsa. Right now you did it for schach. You did it for shade, but you might come to do it. So it's Psul Rabbana. And one of the Mishnahs he learned Mishum Taslam and Osai, which will mean that it's possible with the Raisa because it wasn't made for schach. But now Rabbi Yaakov keeps on talking. Rabbi Yaakov don't know which one he explained. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan two things. One Pshat in our Mishnah, one Pshat in the other Mishnah. And when he says the rice, one is Rabbanan, but I don't remember which one he meant is the rice, one is Rabbanan. Which one did he explain is Rabbanan? Which one did he explain is the rice? I'll figure it out. Or let's figure it out. Let's see. The Rabbi Yochanan also quotes from Rabbi Yochanan. We're trying to figure out what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said one is the rice, one is Rabbanan. One Mishnah is the rice, one Mishnah is Rabbanan. Rabbi Chibra also said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Pshat in our Mishnah. How come the Chachamim said that bundles of straw bundles of wood, bundles of twigs that you're not allowed to use for schach. Why? Because pa'amim she'adam ba min hasukah min hasadeh be'erev v'chvilas al kseifo u'mal u'manich al gabi sukasa k'dei liyabsha v'nim l'chol le'lesichoch tarama tanas lo minosa. Because sometimes this word pa'amim, go back again, pa'amim. Sometimes a person will come to I didn't mean to do that. 1 second, please. Okay, I can't do it, but the word pa'amim, I'm trying to emphasize. Pa'amim, sometimes a person will come from the field in the evening after a day's work, and he has his bundle on his shoulder, and he's going to put it up on part of the top of a sukkah in order to dry it, and then he's going to say, let's use it for a sukkah, and that is also with the raisa, because he put it up to dry. And therefore, the Mishnah says, don't use a bundle because pa'amim, because sometimes a person will put it up to dry. It means right now, the Mishnah is not talking about he put it up to dry. Right now, he put it up for schach, for shade. He has a bundle, put it up for shade. But sometimes a person will take a bundle, put it for drying. So therefore, we're going to pass it in all cases. We're going to pass our Mishnah with Rabbanan, because sometimes he's going to put it up to dry, and then it's going to be possible with the rice. So how did he learn Shalom Mishnah? With Rabbanan. He said the reason why Mishnah is possible is because you might come to do it for drying. He didn't say Shalom Mishnah was that you put it up to dry. Then it would have been the Mishnah's Daraisa. He said the reason why Mishnah is not good is because you might other times come to put it up a bundle to dry. So therefore, we're going to pass even now that you put it up for schach. Then the Mishnah learns as Rabbanan midaha mishum kizer soda. And since you said that Rabbi Yochanan said one Mishnah is the Raisa, one Mishnah is Rabbanan, since we see Rabbi Yochanan said that one Mishnah is Rabbanan, the other Mishnah is the Raisa. The Mishnah Chotet Begadish was a case that you had a haystack that you didn't do for shade. You put a haystack just to store it, and now you're digging it out. Over there, why is it not good with the Raisa? Because it didn't make it for shade. So since our Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan said, is only with Rabbanan, that Mishnah is the Raisa. So we figured out what Rabbi Yochanan meant to say. That our Mishnah is only Rabbanan, and that Mishnah is the Raisa. Is that good? Not so good? Say it again. Mishnah says don't use bundles of straw. Don't use bundles. Why not? Even though you're putting it up as schach, but someone else or you another time might put it up to dry, and that's going to be possible with the raisa. So now it's also possible with Rabbanan. That's called Rabbanan because you did put it up for schach. If you would have put it up for drying, then it would be possible with the raisa. Also, in the Chotet Begadish, the case was that you put it up, you stacked up this hay. The haystack, not for the purpose of schach, not for the purpose of a shade. You just made it to store the straw, and then you're going to dug it out, so it's possible with the rice because it wasn't made for shade. If you would have done it for shade, you'd say it's possible with Rabbanan because you might do it for just stacking it up. But if you actually stacked it up, then it's possible with the rice.
If it's possible with the Rabbanan, you can't basically use the circuit.
Yeah, no difference. Either way, you can't use it. One is the rice, one is Rabbanan. We're not saying I'm not saying that you could use it. You can't use Rabbanan either. But the pshat is going to be that is Rabbanan. Let's get it over here. Rabbi Yaakov. How come we didn't know? Rabbi Yaakov said, I don't know. Why doesn't he know? Rabbi Yaakov said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this one is Rabbanan. He didn't know this. He didn't hear about it. It doesn't say what he heard from Rabbi Yochanan. He didn't know. But Rabbi Yaakov said, Rabbi Yochanan says, I'm Mishnah's Rabbanan. I'm Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi doesn't understand. It's true. We figured out what Rabbi Yochanan says. But how does Rabbi Yochanan get it? From where did Rabbi Yochanan get that our Mishnah is Rabbanan, that Mishnah is the Raisa? You can learn either Mishnah, either way, as we introduced. You can learn our Mishnah is talking about you put it up to dry, then it's possible the Raisa. You can learn the Mishnah by Chotet Begadish, you put it up, you stacked up the hay for shade, and it's only Rabbanan. So both Mishnahs you can read either way. So why did Rabbi Yochanan figure out that our Mishnah is Rabbanan, that Mishnah is the Raisa? Our Mishnah only says Rabbanan, and you can't say it's the Raisa. You can say our Mishnah is the Raisa also. If the case would have been that he put it up in order to dry, then it's possible the Raisa. And the other Mishnah, the Mishnah over there you can't learn as Rabbanan. You can learn as Rabbanan also, that he stacked up the hay in order to make shade. He knew he was going to carve it out and dig it out and make a sukkah on those. They made it for shade. It could be the case, and it's only possible with Rabbanan. So how did Rabbi Yochanan know which Mishnah is which? Rabbi Yochanan was like in the Lashon of the Mishnah. Like our Mishnah says, don't do it. That doesn't say possible. Our Mishnah says, don't do it. And don't do it means Rabbanan. That means don't do it. But if you did it, it's not possible. It means it's possible with Rabbanan. But with the Raisa, he did a mitzvah of sukkah. But the Mishnah over there, when it says by Chotet Begadish, over there, I'm sorry, let's get it over here.
The next page.
This is the next page, base. So why the case of our Mishnah only with Rabbanim Misachim Mishum Zeres also otherwise Shabbatami. The case of our Mishnah says don't do it. It means with Rabbanim don't do it because you might come to do it when it was made in a way that is possible with the Raisa. But right now it's only Rabbanim. But Hasam over there by the Chotel Begadish, the Tani Ein Sukkah, there says if you dug out a haystack, it's not a sukkah. That's a very severe word. Ain't a sukkah. It's not a sukkah. That means that even with the Evan with the Raisa not being a sukkah. That means it's not a sukkah at all, even with the Raisa.
Which one, by Otzar?
By Chotel Begadish. The two Mishnahs. Our Mishnah says Chavili Eitzim, that's only Rabbanon, and the other Mishnah is Chotel Begadish, and it's the Raisa. But the truth is, there's no difference in all this because everybody agrees that if you made it not for shade, it's possible with the Raisa, and if you made it for shade, but it's usually other times it's made not for shade, then it's possible with Rabbanon. So you can learn either din will be true, but the Mishnah happens to be talking in our case where you made it for schach, and still it's possible with Rabbanon, you might come to make it in a way that it would be not made for schach. So we finished our Mishnah, so to speak. What's the reason? The Mishnah doesn't say that you're not allowed to use chavila. Why not? Why can't you use bundles? Because bundles usually the derech is to put it up for drying. Even though you personally put it up in order for schach, for shade, it's possible because somebody else might come to do it, or you might come to do it another time for drying, and then it's going to be possible with the raisa. So don't even do it when you made it for schach. So a new halacha. The Mishnah before said there are three criteria for schach. It should not be mechuber, it should be not mekabel tumah, it should be grown from the ground, and now the psul rabbanan, that if you made a bundle, it's possible also. A bundle is possible.
Either the Raisa or the...
No. I'm saying that if you didn't put it for sale, you're right. Okay, you said it's good. That if you put it for shade, then it's only possible with Rabbanan. What's Rabbanan? And Amish says don't do it because it's Rabbanan. What's Rabbanan? Even though you did it for shade, you might come to do it for drying, and that's surely possible. So we had a similar Gemara before that you have to make a sukkah for shade, and we said over there that even by the sukkah's ganbach over there, ganbach Rashi said that has to be musachach yochasan, that it was made for shade and not for privacy. Privacy also is not kosher. It has to be made for shade, not for shade. So privacy, or here it talks about the yavshan, or for otzar, to store, all these things are possible with the rice. It's not called sukkah. Sukkah is after the sale. One more Gemara, even though we're doing another Amud, but we caught up.
Excuse me, Rebbe, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please, sure.
In the schach netzach, I heard that there's a problem sometimes depending on how it's tied together. Would that because it would be made into a bundle? Is that what that problem is?
So some people talk about the schach netzach. Schach netzach is like the mats, right? The mats of schach. So
those mats, and depending on how they're tied, are they kosher or not? I'm wondering if that has to do with this.
I would think not. They do talk about it. Is it called a bundle? So, and even though you made it for schach, they don't make it. They make it, but maybe. But I don't think the Pashta says that a bundle is only when you take many sticks together and you tie around it. That's what a bundle is.
Yeah.
But here that they tie each one individually, so that's not called a bundle. That's not similar to a bundle at all. So the Pashta says that the lachar for sure is kosher. I don't. If somebody has any.
It's kosher, but I mean, but is that the Inyan? What we were just learning. That's why people are makpid.
I don't think so. No, I don't see a reason to be makpid because of that. It doesn't sound like a reason to be makpid because it's surely not a chavila. If any big names say though, then I didn't say anything. But I did say something because many hold that as kosher. The Pasha says that it's kosher. The Gemara talks about matzolos. It's pretty hard to say that's a problem because later on we're going to see that we talk about mats, and the Gemara didn't dream that mats is considered a chavila. A chavila is, I understand. The chavila means that you take a bunch of sticks and you bind it all together. But what we do, but the mats that are made up and down, you weave in and out. For sure, it's not called a bundle. If anybody does know anybody that says such a thing, so we'd like to bring it into the Bishmedish.
You want to make it as a mat to walk on. You may not.
Later on, it's going to be a question. If you make it in a way that it's made to be a mat in order to sleep on, to sit on, that's the kabul tumah, no problem. A mat which is made not as a roof, as a partition, but made as something to sit on, that might be a problem with kabul tumah. And these mats are not made for that; they're made for schach. So the chorus for sure is kosher, and we'll get more close. Anybody bring any halach in of the contemporary svarim, but the pashtus is no chavila at all.
So the problem is they go to the marketplace and buy a mat, which is used for, might buy a nice mat with just pieces of reed sewn together, made in India, Pakistan. So I'll buy this for my schach. No, because it was made for the floor.
Okay.
It wasn't made for a schach.
The floor is kabul tumah.
Yeah.
The floor. Usually, if they make it to sit on, and to lie on, that'll be a problem. If they made it expressly for that purpose, I don't. You're right. If that be such kind of case, I don't know if they make it expressly. They probably make it stam and whatever you want to use it for, use it for. They make bad stuff.
They make them with their shkacha that they're making it.
Yes, I say you don't need maybe you don't need hashgacha.
For one purpose.
Yeah. You have hashgacha, then it's no problem. But the question is, do you need hashgacha? If you want to go to some department store and buy a mat, is it made for what is it made for? If it's made for a curtain, it's okay. If it's made for
Even
sitting
like a
on,
wall hanging for
also
noise,
good.
that's
Also,
good. I would
it's not
say
a
that's
couple, it's not a
good.
couple.
But all the time it's on the floor or on a bench.
If it's made to sleep on and to sit on, then it'll be problematic. Okay, Levi Yaakov, did we answer the question?
Sort of. I mean, what was, I don't even remember why or how, but there were certain mats, there was a problem. And so now you're saying maybe the problem had to do with Tuma, it didn't have to do with being
If there's a problem, I don't. If someone mentioned Chavila, this bundle by a mat, I don't see the logic. I don't see that it should make sense. I'm trying to speak hesitantly because maybe somebody.
so then maybe it's like what Chaim David was saying, that it was had to
If
do
it's
with
issue
Tuma.
of Tumah, so then later on talk about that. If it's Makabal Tumah, that's a problem. If it's made to sit on and to lie on. But if it's a question of Chavila, I did hear such talk. But
Why is it so important then? I just understand. I mean, when you see a bunch of, you can see that it's something that's not connected to the ground. So then why was it so important to have a hechsher when you buy schach netzach?
Because the reason.
we're talking. So we just said 2
Because of the
points.
intention. Because of the intention.
If you made it as a mat to sit on, so it's Makabal Tumah. We said the intention, the Klolamar, there should not be Makabal Tumah. It should go from the ground. So you know it goes from the ground, but you don't know if it's Makabal Tumah or not. A mat which is made to sit on is Makabal Tumah. It's like a chair.
Right.
So-
Okay. So that would be a reason why you would need a hechsher.
Yes. As far as Chavila, I don't think there's a problem.
Sounds absolutely good. So you
Okay.
have no, you feel good buying these ones in the from places because they have.
Yeah.
They did that. They made it for
They
the
made it for
purpose of schar. So you
Good.
have nothing to talk. Nothing
Okay.
to worry.
Good. Okay, I'm Rabbi next Gemara. One more Gemara left, which is pretty easy. 2 Gemaras. I'm Rabbi Yudam Rav. Sechecha b'chitzim zchorim ksheva v'nikevas psula. There's male arrows and female arrows. What does that mean? So you have the arrow head and you have the, what would you call it? The stick of the arrow? What would you call it? Anybody have the name of the stick of the arrow?
Most.
In English. Okay, so,
Forgetting the idea.
so if you have an arrow with an arrowhead, so the arrowhead is metal. Usually the arrow itself is this piece of wood. So the question is, if the wood, you want to use the wood for the schach, is it kosher or not? So we don't know, is it makabel tumah? Is it vulnerable to tumah? So the Gemara says it depends if it's pshutik, it's made into a kli, made for a kli. So is it makabel tumah? You made it into an arrow. Is it makabel tumah? So it depends how the arrow stick is made. If it's made that the receptacle is in the wood has a hole in it, and you screw the arrowhead into the wood. So that's called a base kibble. That means that it has a container, it has a receptacle, and wood, the cleates, that has a base kibble is susceptible to tumah. But if it has that metal, the arrowhead is what has the container, and you screw you stick the wood, which has no base kibble, into the arrowhead. So then
It's
the
like
wood
a
itself.
broomstick, the wooden broomstick. They
So
have a screw. They screwed on the side, but it's not a big kibble. It goes
So then it's true,
into the head of the broom.
Yeah, so then it's true teklayetz and it's kosher. The stick itself is not makabel tumah. The stick itself is not makabel tumah because it doesn't have a base kibble, even though it's a kli, but it's a pshu teklayetz. It's and that's what the Gemara says. Chitzim schor means that it's male, means that it goes into the arrowhead, so it has no base kibble, so it's kosher because pshu teklayetz is not makabel tumah. But when the kavos, if it's a chitzim nekavos, means that the stick has the base kibble, it has the compartment, and the arrowhead fits into it. It's possible because it has a base kibble and it's makabel tumah. So the Marsa Kasha, both of these things go simple. Why make a memra out of it? It goes without saying. Scham pshita, of course. Why not? It's pshita ways. Ma'arutem when it's scham atunikevos kamashmal. And since they have both kind of arrows, some are made this way, some are made that way. So you might think we should say all arrows are not good because some of them are possible because it does have a base kibble. Kamashmal is no xera, and the male ones are still kosher. The other point also pashut, when the cave is psula pshita, the other part is pashut, that the one that has a container, has a receptacle, so it's only a base kibble, so it's possible. Ma'arutem, what's the chiddush in that? Ma'arutem, a base kibble, also the base kibble. That even though it has a receptacle, but it's made to be permanently filled. Once you put the arrow into it, so it doesn't come out anymore. It's made to be permanently filled. What's called a base kibble? Something which you fill up and then you empty out, like a cup, a spoon. All these things are made as a receptacle, but you also empty it out. So something which is made to permanently fill, you might think that it's not possible. It is possible. So what do we learn about? These arrows, it depends if it has a base kibble. If it has a base kibble, it's possible because it's makabel tumah. If it doesn't have a base kibble, it's kosher because pshutik le'etz and not makabel tumah. One more Gemara, also about being makabel tumah, and that's called about pishtan. Pishtan is flax that you process to make into a garment, and that's called, they call linen. That the flax plant becomes linen and it's a garment. It becomes fibrous, and you can make, and you could use it as a. So the question is, at what point does it become from a plant the raw material, which is not makabel tumah, the plant is not makabel tumah, and you process it until it becomes a fiber, and then it's makabel tumah. The fibers is a makabel tumah, like it
Meaning
says.
that becomes now like cloth.
Right, becomes like a thread. So at what point did the fibers of the plant change and become now a makabel tumah?
Individually separate.
So there are 3 stages in the processing of flax. So I have it written down in English, which is for those in the business. I don't know if they do it anymore. I'll probably do someplace. But one is called retting, retting, and that means you soak it. A fancy word for soaking. You soak it, retting. And then the second, you beat it, which is that's an easy word to beat it, beating. And the third one is called hackling, and that's when you comb it. You comb them in the fibers. So the Gemara is going to say if you have none of these 3 processes started, then it's surely just a flax plant, then it's kosher. It's not makabel tumah at all. If you did all 3 processes, then it's surely considered a fiber already. That's makabel tumah. It's a thread, and it's very makabel tumah. The question is in between. If you had only some of these processes, is it makabel tumah or not? That's the Gemara. That's the whole Gemara. And this the Ushani Pishtan is much nicer to change the vav into a base. This vav over here, you change it into a base.
Which word?
You look on the screen.
Oh, the
So I've changed it into a base. So you have Anitze Pishtan, Utsani Pishtan, and Hushani Pishtan. So Anitze Pishtan is going to be the process. It's completely processed. It has all the 3 processes already. That you soaked it, you beat it, and you combed it. That's surely already a thread, and it's surely possible. Hushani Pishtan means that it's not processed at all, and therefore it's surely kosher because that's a flax plant. It's surely kosher. It's not makabel tumah. The Hushani Pishtan, if you're masachech with Hushani Pishtan any odea, I don't know what Allah is. It means it's partially processed. I don't know if it's makabel tumah or not. Is it just a plant?
What's missing in this Ushani Pishtan?
Change the vav to a base. You see the vav here?
Bahushan.
Change the vav. Be anitze pishtan, be usani pishtan, be hushani pishtan. There's
What does it mean?
anitze,
I'm trying to get the meaning of the word.
partially processed flax.
Bahushan.
You have anitze pishtan is completely processed. We'll see in a second. Don't do it in pen. You have completely processed pishtan. You have non-processed raw material that's surely kosher, and hushani pishtan is something partially. I don't know what Allah is over there. You can take this word mahu, you can erase it. This word mahu, take it out and transfer it to over here. No, don't do
Cut
that.
and paste.
Cut and paste. Cut it out of here and put it over here. Over here, after the word eniodea, in between these 2 words, the word mahu goes. First he says, anitze pishtan is pasal. Hushani pishtan is kosher. Hushani pishtan, I don't know what Allah is. And now he says, the Hushani Atzman eniodea mahu. I don't even know what it is. Now, first he says, I don't know what Allah is. That's questionable if it's kosher or not. But then he says, I'm not even sure what is called partially processed flax. Manavshach. I mean, what do you hold? Manavshach here doesn't mean like you manavshach, whatever, either way is no good. It just means I don't know. What is your opinion? Here you have the 3 processes. Tori, here Tori means to soak. And in Hebrew you'd say shori, to be shoreh. It means to soak. Daik means to pound. And nafetz means to comb. Tori, daik, and nafetz. So if he pounded it and he did not comb it yet, maybe that's the case. That's the case of that's partially processed, and that I don't know what the halach is. But if it only would have been soaked and not yet even pounded, maybe that's surely kosher. Maybe he's just soaking it is considered they didn't even start the process yet. If you just soaked it, it's not even called partially; it's called nothing, and that's surely kosher. Odilma, maybe if he soaked it, even though he didn't pound it, it's also called partially processed. Maybe it's also a suffix. End of the Gemara. What do we learn? That if it wasn't processed at all, it's surely kosher. If it was processed completely, it's surely possible. If it was processed partially, it's a question. And we don't know. But if it was only soaked, we don't even know if that's in the question. Maybe it's not in the question. Maybe it's surely kosher. So if anybody has this situation, this is the Gemara, that Pishtan has a process which makes it change from a plant into a fiber. And someplace along the road, it is going to change and become a makabel tumah. That's the end of the Gemara. We got another Amud, even though we didn't take it. And one more have to go. If you can still continue. Okay. So we didn't review, so just say over the review. 1 second, please. We're on daf, I'll just get my Gemara. It's just easier to handle my Gemara than the computer. So today's Gemara, we spoke about Psikos and Zu Asiyasa. Psikos and Zu Asiyasa. If you put on the schach when it was still connected, and then you cut it off, so we pass like Shmuel, that it's not good, you have to pick it up and put it down again. By Lulav also, it would apply if you'd hold that Lulav is Zaracheged, but we hold Lulav ain't Zaracheged. We pass like Rabbanan, that you don't have to bind the Lulav at all. It's the Hidden Mitzvah to do it. And we spoke about maybe it's not necessary to actually have a double knot. Maybe it's good enough just to bind it together. However you get bound together, it's a Hidden Mitzvah. It's good to do it. We also spoke about tzitzis, that they have to be made out of separate strings, not of one continuous string. And therefore, you have to first cut it and then put it in and tie it. If you tied it first and then you're going to cut it, pass like Shmuel, that you don't say Psikas and Zuas Yasan. The next source was about the was the source. How do you know that the schach has to have these conditions of Namakabal Tumah and growing from the ground? If you hold that it's sukkah is the sukkahs at the time of the wilderness were Ananiya Kabah, the source will be that a cloud is Namakabal Tumah and it grows from the ground and it comes up from the ground. But if you hold that it's sukkahs mamish, that wouldn't be a good source. And the source at the end comes to be Vasvacham Magonacham Yekvecha, Solas Kasev, Migonacham Yekvecha, from the leftover, not from the actual Goren B'Yekev. Even though it's possible to have wine and make congealed wine, doesn't mean that it says that it has to be only the leftover, and therefore that's Namakabal Tumah and it goes from the ground. Also, Rashi says it's Namachober either because it's already collected. So it's Namachober, those are the 3 psulim of Schach. The Gemara ended off also that in Nechem you see when they went to make sukkahs, they used all these things of leaves, which are Namakabal Tumah, they grow from the ground, the Namachober. The Gemara ended off that if you have Hadash Ota, that's not symmetrical, it's Mishul Hashim, so it's not kosher for Lulav. We'll see the details later on, but for sukkah, surely it's good. The next point said there's Issur Rabbanan to use bundles, even if kosher schach, if they're bundled together, so it's possible for a schach with Rabbanan because you might have used the regular way of piling up bundles which are made to dry. That's possible with the Raisa. Also later on, we're going to say Chotet Begadish, if somebody had a haystack and he dug it out, if he just did it just to stack it up, so it's possible with the Raisa. Even if he would have done it l'shem schach, it would be possible with Rabbanan because it was people sometimes usually do it for stacking hay, so that's why I'm going to say it's possible with Rabbanan also. The case of the Mishnah happens to present it. Our Mishnah is talking about Rabbanan, and Mesachim over there it's talking about in a sukkah means with the rice it's not a good sukkah. So the case was that he stacked it up just for the purpose of storage and not for say shade. So if someone made a sukkah not for shade, it's possible with the rice. He made it for shade, but usually people might use it for other reasons also. So then it might be a possible with Rabbanan. The Gemara said you have to have things in Namakabal Tumah, so we have 2 more Gemaras at the end. One is that arrows, if it has a base keyboard, so it's Makabal Tumah because it has a container, but if it's Pshutiklayes, it has no container, no receptacle, so then it's kosher, it's Pshutiklayes and it's kosher. And you're not gozer out to chitz in the cables. And base keyboard also the Malos, Gemara seems to say that even a permanently filled base keyboard is called a base keyboard and it's not, it is Makabal Tumah. Taisus points out that other Gemara seem to say differently. That's Taisus' issue that the maskana, is it a problem if it's made to permanently fill up? Is it a problem or not? And the last Gemara says about flax that there's a process of making it into a fiber, and at a certain point it changes from a plant into a fiber, usable thread, and then it's not going to be kosher anymore for schach. The Gemara is not sure what that stage is and what the halacha is of that stage, but the yesod we got, the principle we got, that when it's a plant form, it's fully kosher, and when it's already made into a fiber, it's not kosher anymore. Yashikach, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Probably about a Schwarzri over there. What is this? The word? Yeah, we didn't do that yet. That's where we ended today. Yashikach. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.